Coming into this week of the LCS, we had 5 teams remaining. Only 3 teams walked out, 3 of whom are going to Worlds, 1 of whom goes on to face Europe in a monkey fight tiebreaker series, and 2 of whom went home. Let's kick off this week's episode of The Pit. Things kicked off on Thursday with arguably the most lopsided series of the entire weekend, which was Golden Guardians versus Dignitas. I don't think anybody really thought that Dig had a chance, even though Golden Guardians definitely did look weaker in their matchup, obviously losing to NRG in a shocking upset that really nobody predicted. You still came into this series with the feeling that, yeah, Dignitas was realistically outclassed. Even if Jensen has not missed Worlds and there were all these storyline narratives that were like working in their favor, there just wasn't enough to really kind of propel you over the edge to pick them, and that's exactly what happened. Golden Guardians ran over this series so hard. Specifically looking at the top lane, Licorice won most improved player the split, which is entirely understandable. This guy went from winning championships with Cloud9, considered easily the best top laner in the league, to getting replaced by Fudge and just not really doing all that much afterwards. Even at the beginning parts of this year, he still wasn't looking like outstanding, but then whatever clicked in spring into the finals and then into summer, my man has been popping off. And he showed that again against Rich, putting Rich in a literal body bag. Rich was known all split for having these unique and creative picks that would allow him to have some flexibility and allow Dignitas the ability to draft in unique ways. But here, when you're running it down all series, regardless of what you pick, that doesn't really matter. And that's credit to Licorice for just single-handedly bodying him in lane. But there were clear advantages elsewhere. Gory came back online to be that dominant Gory that we remember him being, rather than getting smashed by Palafox. River was playing right like River, and Stixxay and Huhi fully had their monitors on. Stixxay's been playing well all playoffs. I don't want to diminish what he's been doing, but Huhi, it was a night and day difference between what the NRG series was to what this series was. So they were set up well going into a matchup against one of 2 potential opponents. Fun fact, the top apartment up there in that building was actually featured in a TikTok video where like this lady explains like her apartment tour. If I can find it, I'll link it here. Actually, no, that might not, I don't want to just DDoS this person, never mind. But yeah, if you go on TikTok, you'll be able to find it and just like look out in the background and look for this brick building on the other side. It's really unique. Most people coming into this weekend had Evil Geniuses versus Team Liquid being the series to watch, probably the closest out of them all. Jojo Pyun in MVP form trying to carry an underdog Evil Geniuses with players like Shaden and Revenge to Worlds. All they had to do was win this series and they go to that international tiebreaker regardless of what happens from there. But on the other side, you had Team Liquid, who unfortunately faltered against NRG in the upper bracket. NRG then going on to beat Golden Guardians. So I was like, okay, well maybe NRG is just really good and Team Liquid just caught them on their upswing. And what would TL do in this series, because they looked really good in their prior one? 100 Thieves didn't really stand a chance against them. Even in a game where 100 Thieves had like 4 kills on double lift, there was a chance that they threw that. So coming into this, it was pretty close. Most people had this as split decision, but even though some of the games were definitely interesting, I wouldn't say that this series was all that close, which is a theme that we'll see throughout most of the weekend. Revenge was a big question mark. Everybody was hyping him up after he beat TSM and beat Hanser, who was noticeably the worst top laner in the league, or like one of the worst top laners in the league this split. But then EG would go on to get smashed by C9, so I was like, okay, Revenge can't stand up against Fudge, but how will he do against Summit? Another test against a great top laner in the league. And the answer was, not well at all. Yes, Revenge had some good games and had some good plays, but overall the effectiveness of Summit in top lane versus Revenge was just night and day difference. Pyosik also has been coming online recently, and in this series he showed it even more, where he's just playing a very aggressive style alongside TL and APA. Yes, they're getting early game leads, but even in positions where they're behind, they're still trying to fight, still trying to put up a little bit of a fight and go down swinging, which has been really nice to watch even in their losses. In the bot lane, Yon and Core JJ are still the solid rock as ever, and when you looked at Ayla and Unforgiven, you were probably picking TL, and that pretty much carried itself all the way through. On EG's side, anytime that Jojo wasn't just hard carrying games, it felt like they couldn't really do anything, which is fine. Team Liquid was throwing the entire house at JoJo this entire series, which is what you come to expect with EG. They're basically a two-threat team. It is just JoJo and Unforgiven. And Unforgiven, while he's good and carried some games in the regular season, the question was, could he step up to carry this entire series if Revenge isn't going to do it and if Shaden's just there to try and help out JoJo? And the answer was no, they couldn't. You shut down JoJo, you shut down EG. And the theory worked, and it was pretty effective the entire split. This is very similar to 100 Thieves with Double Lip. That's not to say that EG was bad either this split. They were good for their pieces. And believe me, I'll talk about them in another segment coming up. But I would argue this split does nothing but help JoJo even more. Despite the loss, despite them not going to Worlds and him bowing out, I think it's hard to argue with that JoJo's the best mid laner in the LCS, regardless of whether he went to Worlds or not. When your team is living or dying by you and you have to do everything and you're still coming up short but playing well, like, I don't know what else you do. You got to get this man a team, like an actual team that can compete. Now, he's notably on contract with Evil Geniuses through 2024, so somebody would have to buy him out. And if I'm Jack, I'm just looking at him like, this guy could be our mid laner for years to come. If you want to take that risk, go ahead. The question just becomes how... I keep saying that. Why do I keep adopting that phrase? What kind of buyout is EG going to put on JoJo Pyun's head? You're going to assume that it's a lot, given that they want money, and that's clear by the fact that they're cost cutting. They're not just going to let him go for free when they know they have the most valuable asset in the league besides Blaver. But honestly, I'm really hoping that JoJo Pyun is not on EG come next year, especially if EG is just going to go this roster budget route of just like mixing together players. But I don't also want that to take away from the coaching staff. There's one other person that deserves a massive highlight from EG this split, and that is Kelsey Moser, who stepped in as like head of coaching, but basically acted as head coach as they have little to no staff, which is going to become the new standard. She, I feel, never gets the full credit that she deserves in making the most out of players that nobody really thought would come together and hit this high of a high and contend with some of the top teams in the league throughout the entire split. Yes, it came crashing down really hard at the end, but that's a testament to good coaching there. And unfortunately, you couldn't get the pieces to be the sum or greater than the sum of their parts for an extended period of time. But I've seen enough that I could say, yeah, Kelsey Moser continues to deserve a top tier or a top caliber job in the LCS with any org that's willing to have her. If I'm 100 Thieves, I'm looking at her like, yes, please, with players like Sniper and them waiting in the wing. Yeah. Anybody would be lucky to have her, which actually, you know what, I'm going to use this to segue to, are Evil Geniuses selling from the LCS or not? Like, I'm really confused at reporting when it comes to the LCS, and I know there's drama ongoing always of whether people consider me a reporter or not. I've gone through extra steps to make it clear to people that I am a content creator first. I don't break any news. I just give my opinion and talk about it whenever stuff comes out. But that's become more and more difficult when people come out and talk about it. It's like, okay, Dagon says something in face check, but then others refute it, and then there's people like Colomer tweeting, hinting at it, then Dom is saying stuff, but they're like, previously you would wait for Jacob Wolf or like LCS Eevee to say something, and now it just feels like we're getting these leaks all the time, and I don't know what people expect in terms of like how we're supposed to handle the conversation. I've seen a lot of dialogue of like, oh, you should wait until these are official. It's like, well, no, because part of the conversation is part of the leaks. Like, and when there's multiple people saying it, it's kind of hard to avoid that and not talk about it. I get why esports reporting is not really a thing, because it doesn't pay. Like, there's no denying it. There's nobody that wants to like pay people to break stories and be that person, because let's be honest, journalists are most times hated by teams and everybody else for ruining announcements that they have and like revealing secrets behind closed doors. Like that is common in literally every industry everywhere. Journalists are never going to be paid all that well. So in a world where esports money is disappearing, so is the esports journalism that we can base these rumors off, or these decisions off of. But look, my gripes with whether this is legit or not, if EG sells in the LCS like it's reported somebody that we don't quite know yet, I'm happy with that, because a lot of the decisions that were made by upper management of EG were not good in terms of just like human care for players and just like egregious C-suite decisions that should never happen and should be punished. But like, what also happens with EG if they sell their LCS slot in terms of their VCT spot? Are they still in good standing with Riot? Because there's people speculating that, oh, EG's leaving because so they can dodge criticism or dodge punishment from Riot in the LCS over the Danny situation. It's like, okay, well then they would technically punish them in Valorant too, you would think. But this whole situation's a mess, and quite frankly, I just want EG, I want EG C-suite out of the LCS so that we don't have to deal with this, but I want to make sure that every mid-level and normal employee at Evil Geniuses still has their job. So I'm praying that whoever buys them out does exactly what NRG did and just bring the league pillar of EG over to their organization, give it 6 months, and then make changes from there. Our third matchup of the week was one that I think could have been close if every player on NRG was performing, but wasn't the case. Cloud9 3-0'd NRG. It really, I mean, you had some games where some players stepped up and played well, and there were moments where it was close, but every time we got to that 20-25 minute mark, you just knew that C9 was going to win a fight and the game was going to be over, which is not a bad thing on NRG. Okay, maybe a little bit it is. Palafox didn't have his greatest series here, but it just speaks to how well C9 is meshing. That helps whenever you've had a roster that's consistent all year long, has been on top of the table for a year and a half now with 4 out of 5 of these players. They should be the favorite. And going into finals, now that C9 has secured their spot there, I mean, you should be predicting C9 to win 3-0 there, regardless of who they face afterwards. Berserker in playoffs has been the clear MVP. If he played like this during the regular season, he would have been MVP of the entire league. But hey, so we knew that C9 was going to be better in best of fives, and Berserker clearly is just the best of 5 player in the LCS, bar none. Every time we've gone to playoffs that he's been there, he just performs incredibly well. Even whenever C9 faltered in spring of last year, whenever he first got in here and they lost to EG and Jojopyun and Danny, or actually I forget who knocked them out of playoffs. I think it might have been 100 Thieves. But his Berserker was still playing incredibly well. It just seems like the map in general and everything else around them kind of just collapsed. He's just so good, and it feels like he's by far and away the best bot laner in the LCS. We are so lucky that LS was able to get him from T1 and bring him over to North America, because god dang. For NRG, Dokla did have a good series here. He kept up with Fudge for the most part, never really went behind, and even had games where it felt like he was ahead. The Renekton, I think in game 3 it was. He was getting really far ahead early, but like most Renekton picks, you're then relying on the rest of your team for you to be able to pass the baton on to. You can get a lead there, but you need to be able to usher it into other lanes and other people to be able to then close out the game, because Renekton's never going to be that guy that does that unless it's a Renekton Nidalee comp that really snowballs early. And that's also not going to happen against C9. The problem was FBI and Palafox were not able to do that, notably with FBI having one of the weaker series, I would say, for himself throughout these playoffs. Game 3, most people are going to remember the fairly egregious Sivir Boomerang, which ended up getting him killed under tower, which cost them the game, and they ended up getting 3-0 because of it. But overall, it is this continued pattern for FBI, speaking on behalf of a 100 Thieves fan who watched this for a year and a half now, of when the big moment comes, when you need FBI to just unlock that next level, it doesn't feel like it's there. It feels like there is this ceiling to him. And that becomes even more apparent whenever you get to stadium events, which we'll discuss in a bit, but I am a little bit worried about FBI in this bot lane when it comes time to the Prudential Center in Newark. But hey, at least they're going. They're guaranteed to be there, and playing notably against the winner of easily the best series of the year. Hands down, a full 6 games. If you have not watched it and you have somehow not been spoiled this far into this video, please pause this, go watch Team Liquid versus Golden Guardians. It was incredible from start to finish. Team Liquid, spoiler starting here, coming out hot out of the gate, 2-0. When you think about Team Liquid winning these series, you've been thinking about Summit dominating lane and then ushering that elsewhere to allow for the team to just take over. And as a unit, they just snowball from that one lane winning. But that's not how they were getting these leads. It was APA and Pyosik playing out of their minds. Easily the best mid-jungle combo of anybody that I've seen in the LCS playoffs so far. In those first 2 games, they were unstoppable. Piosik's Viego was unbelievable, and if you recall correctly to last year, he was consistently getting his Viego banned. He was never allowed to play it during Worlds, and he was showing clearly why in this series. It was fun to watch. Oh my god, and APA, despite his bad series when this whole playoff started against NRG and him notably like falling apart, that was not the case here, and he has slowly been ramping up each and every series ever since. But that 2-0 didn't lead to an immediate victory for Team Liquid. Golden Guardians would go on to take the next 2 games. You know, the one person we haven't talked about so far in terms of like winning these games, it was Summit. That's because Licorice was keeping up with Summit and being incredibly impactful in almost every game despite the losses early on. And come games 3 and 4, whenever Golden Guardian started clicking, Licorice was still keeping up with Summit, being effective in these team fights, who he was getting proper engages, and Golden Guardians was just constantly ahead of the ball versus Team Liquid, and it gave them the ability to come back. Now, the thing I will say post-mortem with this series is that we now know that Summit was sick throughout all of this. So while yes, it was great that Licorice was keeping up with Summit, Summit was also not 100%. And I think that's going to be an important note, because going into Game 5, which had the pause and remake while Golden Guardians was ahead, Golden Guardians opted to remake the game, which is their choice, and good that they were in the lead in making that call. But come Game 6, Team Liquid was able to pull it out against Golden Guardians. Notably, again, off the back of APA and Piosik playing well, but on top of that, Yawn just being willing to go in at any moment and clean up these fights. To be fair, with TL and Golden Guardians, for both of them, it was very much like an overall team effort, more so than it felt like any other series or team that's existed. Like Cloud9 so far in playoffs has very much been like berserker, like hard carrying games. NRG was a team effort, but like Palafox, when they were winning, was like the clear standout. In this series, it just felt like both teams, whenever the games were close, were firing on all cylinders. Even in the losses, TL was still fighting together and constantly being willing to take fights. Even when they were 10k down at times, you thought, they actually have a chance of winning this. They might pull this out, which has been incredible to watch. And honestly, it's exactly what I want from somebody who has now secured our 3rd seed going into Worlds. They are now going to represent us internationally. APA making his debut on the LCS stage in a finals, but a finals weekend, and now also at Worlds in his rookie split. Oh man, that's incredible. I always knew that TL was going to be a good best of 5 team if they could just get there, and it feels like once again, end of the year comes, Piosik's playing better, and voila, TL's in the driver's seat. Now, a quick moratorium for Golden Guardians. I do feel really bad that they lost. I wish that we could see both of these teams at finals weekend, but if there was anybody that I feel confident in sending to play Europe as our 4th seed, it is definitely Golden Guardians. They have that international experience, notably picking up the win against BLG at MSI, and I fully expect them to be able to take this series against EU. But the important thing for them is that they are the team most in need of time off. It doesn't seem like Cloud9 was hit as bad by the burnout from MSI, but Golden Guardians definitely. So having this little bit of extra time off and still having the ability that like, hey, we can go to Korea and start boot camping a few weeks later because the LEC doesn't wrap up in the same period of time, is going to be a really good thing for them. And I think come Worlds, Golden Guardians could be a team to be messed with. Obviously not against the top tiers of Asia, before anybody comes at me for that. I'm just saying in general, in the way the Worlds is formatted this year, we are likely going to have more matchups of like Europe versus North America in the group stage. So having Golden Guardians there to take out even more EU teams is going to be very much needed. No grinds my gears this week. We'll talk about that next week and in the other videos to come. Starting after the LCS is wrapped up and after next week's The Pit, I'm going to use Wednesday specifically to address single issues that the LCS has and like break them down to extreme detail and talk about how I think we can fix them. I don't want to spend the remainder of my time today talking about that. Rather, I just want to give the hype up for the 3 teams that we are going to be seeing in New Jersey, starting with the team that I do think is going to finish 3rd, but I'm really happy that they're still going, and that is NRG. Look, I do think this roster has now elevated to a level above what they were last split. I think it's great that they made it this far. They are a wild card to a certain extent because we've never seen Dokla and Palafox on the stage. We don't know how they're going to react to that moment. When you get in these moments of extreme pressure and hype and having these fans around you, when you've never experienced that before. Like, yeah, they've had the arena in Los Angeles, but they've never played in a full-blown stadium. That can change a lot. Who knows? They could step up and be great, and they could cause an upset over Team Liquid in this this loser's final matchup. But seeing FBI on this stage and he's never the same player that he is during the regular season for whatever reason, whether it's stage fright or something else, who knows. But I don't have faith fully that they'll be able to come together and click against Team Liquid. I hope they can. I respect the org, I respect the players, and if they win, I ain't gonna be upset. I don't think they'll be able to beat C9, but then again, I don't think anybody's beating C9 this weekend, so that just is what it is. That said, the one team that I think could pull off at least 2 wins against Cloud9 is going to be Team Liquid. If Summit is 100% healthy going into the series, he can handle Fudge in a way that nobody else can. Looking at the bot lane, Yawn is the only one that might be crazy enough remaining in this playoffs to be able to compete against Berserker. But again, another case of 2 players on this squad that have never played in front of an arena this big in both APA and Yawn. But when you compare those two to the 2 players that haven't of NRG, like, I see a clear world where APA and Yawn just get even more energized than they already are and just enhances this like punch them while they're down style that TL is just willing to fight at all times. And if that is enhanced even more, that could be fun to watch, and that could contend with C9. We already know Summit's going to be good. Pyosik has won Worlds in a stadium even bigger than the one we're going to be in. And Core JJ, well, he's been there, done that. So yeah, I think he'll be fine. TL, for my prediction, I do think beats NRG 3-1 on Saturday, taking us to Sunday against Cloud9. Look, they're the cream of the crop for a reason. They're the best team in the LCS. They have not dropped a single game all playoffs. And if they're facing Team Liquid, I think they'll drop 1. If they're facing NRG, I don't think they drop a game at all. But what else can you really say about these guys? Sure, Fudge isn't the best top laner in the LCS, but you know what? He gets his job done, allows for Blabber and Berserker to carry, and as long as MNS does not in, they'll be fine. Sven has become an incredible support in the LCS, and I expect him to maintain that going into finals itself. So yeah, these are the guys to beat. The question is, can anybody do it?